Yeah.
Is that?
Guys ready?
No.
Everybody ready?
We're ready.
Manistee City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 17, 2017 is now called to order. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Cooper,
Here.
Councilmember Beaton,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski.
Here.
Councilmember Goodspeed,
Here.
Mayor Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Woodruff,
Here.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Here.
City Manager,
Here.
City Attorney,
Here.
DPW Director,
Here.
Finance Director, Planning and Zoning Director, Public Safety Director, and City Engineer.
Thank you. Public hearings, we have none. Citizen comments on agenda-related items. This is an opportunity for any citizen to speak to an agenda-related item. If you do wish to speak, please come forward, state your name and your address, and limit your comments to 5 minutes, please. Is there anyone that wishes to make public comment? Okay, we'll move on. Consent agenda. All agenda items marked with an asterisk are on the consent agenda and considered by the city manager to be routine matters. Prior to approval of the consent agenda, any member of council may have an item from the consent agenda removed and taken up during a regular portion of the meeting. Consent agenda items include approval of minutes, payroll, invoices, notification regarding the next work session, consideration of the 2017 Salvation Army Red Kettle campaign, consideration of the 2017 Booze, Brews, and Brats event, consideration of annual Victorian Sleigh Bell Parade, and Old Christmas Weekend. At this time, council could take action to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski and a second by Councilmember Beaton. Is there any discussion? Should you please take roll?
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed,
Here. Yes. Sorry.
Councilmember Woodruff,
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Here and yes.
Thank you. Unfinished business. Consideration of establishing salary for Heather Peffley as city clerk. Council appointed Heather Peffley as city clerk when city clerk Michelle Wright retires on January 5, 2018. City charter stipulates that council set the salary for city clerk. The city's wage and classification system sets the clerk's position in pay grade 6. The city manager is recommending that city council set the salary for Heather Peffley as city clerk at $58,578, which is step 1 of pay grade 6. This item was tabled from the October 3, 2017 meeting for further discussion. At this time, council could take action to set Heather Peffley's salary at $58,578, pay grade 6, step 1, effective January 6, 2018.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Councilmember Whitliff and a second by Councilmember Beaton. Is there any discussion? Would you please take roll?
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed,
Yes.
Councilmember Woodruff,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. New business. Consideration of Consumer Energy Company license extension. Consumers Energy Company has requested an extension of their license to perform environmental testing at the former manufactured gas plant site located at 30 Jones Street. The original license was granted in 1999, and they are requesting an extension through December 31st, 2020. At this time, council could take action to authorize an extension of license with Consumer Energy for 30 Jones Street through December 31st, 2020.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski and a second by Councilmember Whitliff. Is there any discussion?
Is there anybody here that could answer the progress they're making? Are they making any progress?
Yes, they are making progress. They did get their remediation plan approved by the DEQ, and so they're looking at starting the remediation as soon as they can next year.
If memory serves me, we have extended this once before.
This actually the first was in 1999, and we've been extending it throughout those years. And we did extend it again last year.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, it's pretty fluid because like I say, they've been doing a lot of site work and getting the information necessary to satisfy the DEQ, and then just recently they did get their permit to go through with that plan.
So that they're now approved to proceed?
Yeah, and they're gonna be staging equipment and ready to roll as soon as they can next year.
Do they say anything about when they expect to complete the?
No, I
project?
think they've asked that it be through 2020. They think they'll be done in 19, but they just wanted some breathing room.
Any further questions or discussion? Would you please take roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitliff?
Yes.
And Mayor Smith?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of a partial split request from Doug Westervelt. A request has been received from Doug Westervelt for a parcel split. Mr. Westervelt lives at 2091 12th Street, parcel 51-373-702-07, located in the R1 zoning district, and is requesting to split the property into two parcels that meet the setback requirements of zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission reviewed and recommends council endorse the request. At this time, council could take action to approve the request from Doug Westervelt to split parcel 51-373-702-07 into two parcels as submitted with survey dated September 20, 2017, prepared by the Spicer Group, job number 124950SG2017.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Beaton and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski. Is there any discussion?
No, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing that sold. Hopefully that's their intent, to sell it and put a house there and add to our tax base.
Or would you please take roll?
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitliff?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes.
And Mayor Smith?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of bond authorizing ordinance for the issuance of water and sewer revenue and revenue refunding bonds in an amount not to exceed $4 million. The city is subject to a Michigan Department of Environmental Quality National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit that mandates wet weather corrective action program to remove the last combined sewer overflow. This permit has been discussed several times at past council work sessions and meetings. A notice of intent resolution was approved by council on August 22, 2017 for the issuance of debt to finance the needed activities to comply with the corrective action plan. No referendum petitions were filed, so the city can proceed with issuing debt. In addition, the city has identified an opportunity to refinance existing water and sewer debt, which will save about $63,500 in interest costs. The approval of the bond authorizing ordinance is necessary to authorize and proceed with the bond sale. At this time, council could take action to approve a bond authorizing ordinance for water and sewer revenue and revenue refunding bonds in an amount not to exceed $4 million.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski and a second by Councilmember Whitliff. Is there any discussion?
Just have a question. How long is the bond? 20 years. And that 63,000 savings is spread over that 20-year period?
No, it's. It would be spread over the existing life of the bonds that are being refunded, which is about 8 to 9 years.
Okay.
It's a single bond that's being refunded, Mr. Bradford?
Yes, it's the 2005 revenue bond issue that we issued.
And what's the amount of the refunding bond? The,
The amount of the refunding bond,
Yeah.
I believe, I can get the number, it's like $2 million. The amount of the bond issue that's being refinanced is $2,005,000. $2,005,000 is the amount of principal that's gonna be refinanced.
okay, so the cap bond is about $1.5 million?
Yeah, that, we're expecting that's gonna be $1,455,000, depending on market conditions.
Okay, I thought that's what it was. I
Yep.
was just curious as to how it would break down and such. So you say it's about 8 years left on the other bond?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Any other questions or comments? Would you please take roll?
Councilmember Whitliff?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
And Mayor Smith?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of a contract with Compliance Incorporated to complete a final assessment for the leaking underground storage tank located at 280 Washington Street. The city previously owned and operated underground storage tanks and a fuel dispenser at 280 Washington Street. In 1994, a petroleum release was reported when the storage tanks and dispenser were removed. The city undertook mitigation efforts to remove the impacted soil and contamination. Monitoring assessments conducted in 2012 and 2013 indicated the presence of fuel components in the soil and groundwater at the site. The Department of Environmental Quality has ordered a final assessment be completed. A request for qualifications and cost proposal was created with 2 submissions received. Compliance Incorporated for Task 1 was $1,780, Task 2, $10,650, with Task 3 at $23,515. Gosling Jubank was Task 1, $5,088, Task 2, $13,607, Task 3, $27,128. At this time, council could take action to approve a contract with the low qualified bidder, Compliance Incorporated, to complete a final assessment for leaking underground storage tank located at 280 Washington Street, and further authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski and a second by Councilmember Whitliff. Is there any discussion?
Could someone explain the task? And what each task is, for clarity?
Back when the DEQ requested that the city takes action to complete the investigation and remediation of the contamination that has resulted from the old underground storage tank, we looked at what needs to be done. And I discussed it with the MDEQ on behalf of the city, and we concluded that there are still unknowns about the nature of the contamination, the location of the contamination, even after all of the environmental assessments that we did back in 2012, 2013. So what we agreed with the DEQ was that we were going to approach the work that it's needed there in phases. And the first phase was to have the selected consultant review all of the background information, all of the studies that the city and actually the DEQ did over the years, compile them into one document, and based on that information, they would develop a work plan for future phases of investigation and remediation. So that is the first task. The second task is an assessment of the status of the current status of the contamination, both at the source area, which is approximately where the sand pile is on the north side of the garage. And also it will involve taking groundwater samples from some of the existing monitoring wells that are located on the property and off-site to determine what is the current status of the contamination that leaves the property, because that's what drives MDEQ's actions. And then, based on that information, they will determine whether a deep, one or more deep monitoring wells are needed further away from the source. If it appears that, as part of the second task, we find that there is contamination in some of the monitoring wells that are further away from the garage, then we'll determine, or they will determine where to install deep wells to determine the presence and the configuration of the groundwater plume, if that contamination has gone far away from the garage. At this point, we do not know how far the contamination has gone. We just don't have monitoring points except for the existing ones. And we have suspicion that some of the contamination may be diving and going deeper into the aquifer and then migrate most likely towards the southeast. So that's why we structure the the investigations in 3 phases, because we didn't want to commit to the MDEQ. We're going to do all of the work at some major expense if we didn't have to do all of that work. So that was my recommendation to the city manager and the DPW director. So we structure the request for proposals and qualifications with that approach in mind.
I guess my question is, and you're going southeast, and southeast, kind of southeast directly, is where the old Amoco station was, over by Mancino's, Noisart Bar, I mean, are we picking up some of that, or are we picking up, is it, I mean, how do we know it's, I mean, I'm not trying to get out of it, don't get me wrong, but
No,
how do
okay.
we know?
I understand what you're saying. Okay. The monitoring wells that we have on-site and off-site, the well that is furthest away from the garage site is probably less than 100 feet.
Okay,
So we know based on the existing wells that the contamination is present as far as one of those wells. And we also know based on groundwater flow direction, we measure the water levels and we determine which way the groundwater and the contamination are moving. So we know that they're moving from the water and the contamination are moving from the northwest towards the southeast. Now, that is based on the wells we have. What happens in groundwater aquifers, you get some change sometimes. Sometimes the plume of contaminants is going to turn in one way or another, or it may go down deeper because the groundwater is pulling the contamination. So we know that it's moving towards approximately south to east. My best estimate is that it's going southeast. Now, in order to pick up contamination from some of the other sources of contamination we have in town, it will have to move quite far. It will have to go as far out as US 31. We don't know that it has gone that far, if any. But if, and we have cases in town where we have groundwater contamination that has migrated far enough from a source area where it start commingling with other contamination from other sources. Now, we do not have a known source, to my knowledge, between the DPW garage and the US 31 or down by Memorial Park, or Veterans Memorial Park, because that's the next area where we know we have contaminant sources. That would be south and a little bit southeast, down along Washington.
so it's moving, okay.
Does this amount of money that we're looking at here, is that going to cover it, or could there be a possibility of more cost in the future?
When we deal with groundwater contamination with unknowns, there is always the possibility that we're going to have future expenses. What we have discussed with the DEQ is, once we establish the configuration of the plume, and let's assume it goes down one block towards the southeast. Because the city is served with municipal water supply, the city then will can put an ordinance in place that will prohibit the use of groundwater through new wells. And then that will be the approach that the MDEQ will accept, rather than going to the source and doing some major remediation. We may have to go back to the source area and remove some of the contaminated soils. What happened was, back in the mid-1990s, excuse me, when they removed the when they removed the underground tank, it was leaking. There was contamination in the soils surrounding the tank and in the groundwater right under it. They excavated and they removed some of the contaminated soils all the way down to the groundwater, and they removed them along with the tank. It appears, based on what I see now, that back then they did not remove all of the contamination from the soils, from the sides of the excavation. Then with time, after they backfill with clean material, some of that leftover contamination slowly migrated towards the center of that old excavation. And that's why we're seeing contamination again, because after 1994-95, the monitoring wells that they had did not show any contamination, which to me then indicates, and that's kind of, we see this a lot, that there was some leftover contamination. It started coming back into the hole, into the excavated area, and recontaminated the soil. So worst case I see at this time is having to remove some of the soils again from the source area.
Thank you.
This task 1, task 2, task 3, are these separate contracts?
No, it's one contract, but it is in 3 phases. So the project manager, I'm assuming Jeff or Thad, will authorize them to do task 1. Then, depending on what they come up with the work plan, will authorize part 2, phase 2. I anticipate that we will need both phases 1 and 2, but we may not need phase 3. And that will be determined by the findings of phase 2. So my recommendation was, and I believe that's how they're going to do it, is authorize 1 phase at a time. But this way they don't have to come back and get authorization for doing each phase. So
I was just reading an article in Grand Rapids about a legislative amendment to some money that was available for fuel tank cleanup, and they had advanced the date on that to include more recent events because those funds available. Is there any opportunity in that regard to recoup some of these costs with some of these grants that are out there?
yeah, it's called the MASTFA program. It's actually they call it the son of MASTFA because we used to have that program way back in the 90s, and they reauthorized it. It has different guidelines now, and that is used for remediation of contamination associated with underground storage tanks. The one issue that is not clear, and I have talked with the DEQ about it, is that this fund is actually funded through gasoline taxes, and it is supposed to be for private entities. However, I believe that municipalities may be able to tap on it, but I have not followed that enough to tell you with certainty. But certainly, we'll be looking at that, and we'll be looking at other sources. In the past, we tried to do assessments and remediation at that site with US EPA brownfield assessment grants we had, and they would not allow us because technically the city is a liable party. So,
does anyone know how many? Do we have any wells, any households in that vicinity that are using well water other than municipal water?
yeah.
Not that we're aware of. We've got, as far as the water operators have informed me, all of the wells, the private wells within the city have been removed. Councilwoman Beaton gave me an address that wouldn't be to the southeast of that, but could be near it, so we'll check that out tomorrow. There are a couple wells within the city that are used for irrigation, but none in that area that I'm aware of.
What's the chance of that getting into that aquifer and just leaving the city and going and starting contaminating the surrounding area?
That's out of my.
What's the probability, or if there is a probability, of that contamination getting in the aquifer and just blooming out into other communities, other areas? Could it leave the city? Could it be, end up in Manistee Township someplace? That
Well,
contamination?
Theoretically, yeah, any contamination can keep going. I mean, I've seen it. I've tracked contamination for like 6 miles. However, I don't think we have the conditions here that would allow the contaminants to migrate that far. What we don't know is exactly which way it's going once it gets about 100, 200 feet away from the site. Also, we have some indications based on water level observations that it's moving down, and that becomes the concern. Once it gets down, you know, where exactly it's going, because sometimes you can have the shallow groundwater moving this way and the deep going in different direction. I don't think they're very far from each other, but that's part of the assessment that, actually phase 2 assessment that we recommend doing.
When we talk about contamination,
Yes.
I very much read an updated article on Wolverine Industries in their dump sites and such, where the readings being taken from groundwater there are thousands of times higher than federal standards.
State standards
What
in
sort
this
of
case.
contamination
Yeah.
levels are we looking at here?
We have 2 compounds, gasoline compounds that exceed some of the state cleanup criteria, and that's what's driving the investigations. The concentrations are not excessive. It's not like 100 times the criteria, but they are in the order of maybe twice, 3 times the criteria. Okay. So they're not excessive, but they exceed the state cleanup criteria. So for the DEQ to approve putting restrictions in the use of the groundwater, the main thing they want to know is how much contamination is out there and where is it?
Okay. Thank you.
I'd just like to clarify that when we set up this request for qualifications and a cost proposal, we wanted to make sure that we maintain the same professionals throughout, so that we had continuity. And as T explained, task 1 and 2 will most certainly have to be completed. Task 3, we'd like all 3 of them to be approved tonight. We will release the consultant with task 1. Once they've completed that, we're able to review the results and get feedback from the DEQ. We'll release the company to do task 2 and go through that same process. Once that work is completed, we'll have the opportunity to review it with the state, and then depending on the results of that, if necessary, we would proceed with task 3. And if not, task 3 would not be approved to move forward, and we wouldn't have to expend those funds. And this likely will span into the next budget cycle as well. So I would expect this would take into well into 2018.
Thanks.
Okay. There's no possibility of this plume or contamination reaching any of our city wells? We're all good?
I would
on
say
our
there's a
reading?
very low likelihood of that, based on where our aquifers that serve our wells, they're far away and come from a different direction.
Okay.
I have a message, I'm sorry. Question. This is a contract for all 3 tasks?
Yes.
Well, it could be for all three tasks, as Jeff explained, we would only go to that third phase if needed. But
But the contract is for.
The contract is for all three.
Okay, all right. So if we make the motion to approve, it is for the contract
it is.
for all three?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Any other questions or comments? If not, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Pontiac,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitliff,
Yes.
Mayor Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Notices, communications, and announcements. The report from the Ramsdale Regional Center of the Arts. Regular part of each council meeting is a report from a cooperating agency, organization, or department. At this time, Ms. Sarah Helge will report on the activities of the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts and respond to any questions the council may have regarding their activities.
Well, good evening. I'm Sarah Helge, Board President at the Ramsdale. I believe that my name is on the agenda tonight because when we received our assignment from the city, we were between executive directors. But for the last 8 months, we have been enjoying the new leadership of a young man who's new to our community, Xavier Verna. The board is very pleased at the progress we're making, and you're going to find out about it right now. We think Xavier is an asset not just to the Ramsdale, but to the entire community as a whole. So here's Xavier Verna, the new executive director at the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Is there a clicker? Thanks for your time. So I'm going to talk about my time here the past 8 months and then also focus on the update on the fiscal year 2016-2017 and then talk a little bit about our plans for 2018. So I'm on the second slide, and this is just a quick snapshot of what our structure is at the moment, our board of directors, and from that stems our committees, and then there's me, and some staff and volunteers. And the board and the committees meet with some regularity each month to approve and move things forward for the organization. And our staff and volunteers, just fill in help as needed. And speaking of volunteers, we've had a tremendous amount of support from our volunteers. We have some of the best volunteers working with us and making sure that our events go smoothly. From what I've tracked, this year alone, there's been over 600 hours put in. A lot of that time gets used when we have main stage shows in the theater, but there are also many workshops that we held over the summer where we needed volunteer help. And also, let's not forget our amazing board of directors who invest a ton of time into managing the organization and provide excellent support. And in case any of you or anybody in the room is interested in volunteering, you can always feel free to contact me. And along the lines of our volunteers, I wanted to also take this time and recognize a tremendous supporter of our community and the arts, Nancy Line, who passed earlier this year. She helped drive a lot of different things at the Ramsdale, and we're very thankful for her and what she did. Her son, Bill Hattendorf, serves on our board, and so we will miss her dearly. Currently, our building usage, our top 3 are written there. Many of you know the Conservatory of Dance recently lost their space at the Bryony building, so we lend a hand and are helping them out temporarily as they seek permanent space. But between the Conservatory of Dance, our other dance studio led by Ingrid Bond, the Weddings, and the Manistee Civic Players, they're the ones that utilize the building the most. On top of that, we have all of our workshops. We have events that we hold in the theater, produce live music events, and a few other offhand, like graduations and things like that take place at the Ramsdale. But very excited to say that we are tremendously busy right now, and at capacity at certain points, and we'll be busy all the way through Sleigh Bell Week. So it's a lot going on at the Ramsdale. We're very proud of the work we do. So kind of going into some of our needs, this is just a listing of a few of them, but there's been a lot of discussion over some of our technology. These are just a few pictures of things we've identified we need to upgrade on: soundboard, some of the communications systems for the theater, cables, things like that. We've also talked about really upping our game when it comes to marketing and being able to put some better signage outdoors in the exterior of the building. And proud about that new sign that we have. There's a picture of that there. We're looking for other ways to continue to market what happens at the Ramsdell in the exterior of the building. But while we're doing that, we're also making some upgrades. This is a picture of our building caretaker, Doug Savela, who's been tremendous working in the basement dressing rooms under the theater stage. The public doesn't see that often, so this is just an opportunity for you to see. We've painted a lot of the walls and the doors and dressed up the room so it's better for our guests. Earlier last week, we met with the executive director of the Crooked Tree Arts Center. We are benchmarking one of the most successful arts organizations in northern Michigan. That is the Crooked Tree Arts Center. And there have been several studies and strategic plans that we did for the Ramsdell, but in this instant, Liz was actually really kind to offer her time and expertise free of charge. So we met with her last week, and we talked about a lot of things, challenged a lot of assumptions, and came up with 3 feasible goals we think are good for the Ramsdell, something that I personally feel is attainable within the next 6 to 12 months. Very proud of the shows and events that we've held at the Ramsdell. We brought children's theater back. We've had tons of live music show opportunities, art exhibits, opportunities for kids to participate. With all of that, we've had over 30 different events that you could attend at the Ramsdell. With the artists that have come performed on stage, there have been over 10 premieres. So in other words, 10 different artists from the region and outside of the state who have never performed on the Ramsdell stage before. And we were able to achieve that this year. And obviously with everything that we're doing and with the variety that we offer, we are growing our audience base significantly. So the next few slides, we'll talk a little bit about the economic impact that we, the arts organization, provides. And so these are some surveys that I take of our audience after shows. And so one of the questions here is, did you visit a restaurant in Manistee on the day of the show or the workshop or whatever took place? So almost 50% of people say yes. The other, 53%, they are from the area, so they probably ate at home. But the next slide also, it's consistent. And the question was, what was your main reason for visiting the city of Manistee? Well, this tells us that most of our audience is from this area. That's that was a safe assumption even before we asked this question. But a lot of people visiting from town or just coming to the city of Manistee for an event at the Ramsdell. And then this one, although we know we're not perfect, we know we definitely have a lot to improve on, but for those people who have taken this survey, they have expressed that they are satisfied with their experience at the Ramsdell. I think a lot of that goes to the great work that our volunteers do, because they're the first people that people greet when they enter the building. So again, I want to thank our volunteers for making our patrons' experience really awesome. This is an endowment with the Manistee County Community Foundation, one that Nancy Lyon helped start a number of years ago. What I'd like to demonstrate here is that we've identified that there is a great need to invest more in this and to try and grow this fund. Obviously, we have 2 different accounts set up here. One was for preservation, the other one was to support programming, and then there's some spendable amounts throughout the year based on how the market does. But the more that we can grow this, the more that spendable account will grow, and it'll help support our programming and restoration. And now we're going to get into some of the finances here. You'll see some comparisons between last year and this year. some great news about, operating revenues increasing. What we had budgeted for 2018 is down below, it's 216,000. And then in addition to that, there's a city contribution of 60,000. And as far as the expenses go, we have, the operating costs have increased because of marketing and our performances. We're booking a lot more live performances at the Ramsdale. But the progress we're showing is that because of the aggressive approach we've taken to donations, we've been able to decrease that net loss. So what we have budgeted for this year in 2018 is a net loss of close to $50,000, which I think goes to explain the reason why there's a need for city support at the moment. Obviously, with the city support, we'd be able to break even this year. And this is progress after 1 year, and every year we're shooting to get better and better. So the next slide is going to show you and demonstrate the progress that we've made on donations from 2016 to 2017. And what we've projected for 2018 is even higher. So we're, again, being really aggressive about that so that we can support our programming, but we really do still need the city support and also support from our donors. So this is just a summary of a few things that I've just talked about. Just some upcoming shows. I'll just highlight a few, but next, like I said, we're really busy. So we have an art exhibit starting this weekend. We have the Civic Player shows taking place this weekend and next weekend. We'll be doing a honoring our World War I Veterans show on Veterans Day and launching that with a exhibit of artifacts and memorabilia from that time period, and we've partnered with local museums to make that happen. So very thankful for their support. We've invited Michigan's premier ragtime orchestra to play music from that time period as well, so it should be a really special event. And then with the Acropolis Reed Quintet, what we're doing with that, it's not on there, but on November 13 and 14, there are matinee shows that are going to be free for students, and I've been in touch with superintendents and a few principals to support bus kids to the Ramsdale to see a free concert during school. There's also an evening concert. And then partnership with the Chamber of Commerce to do Sleigh Bell at the Ramsdale. And we will be doing a show that's directed by Dr. Rick Plummer called The Tuneful Christmas Carol. And it is a show that the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts is producing from November 30th to December 3rd. And part of our profits will also go toward benefiting local charities during that week. So that's it for my presentation. Any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Interested in the 10 new acts that performed at the Ramsdale?
Yeah.
Are they coming back?
Some of them might be, yes.
Okay.
Already we know Karen Curlee is very interested in coming back. She was one of the few. She did the one-woman theater show. Let's see. And she did it for free as a benefit to the Ramsdale. We had a really great group over the summer that, they're all interested in coming back. So the likelihood of them coming back, if not next year, but at some point is high, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Questions?
I just want to thank you for all the good work you're doing. I get a little ticket, or I get a little notice from My Tickets North or whatever that is that lets me know when all the shows are available. They want me to come, so I think you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
I think you're also doing a good job, but and you're making progress. But you're kind of never ending. It would be nice to have some sort of a target date out there for self-sufficiency. The city pays the mortgage for the roof is ended. We still got the heating and cooling system, which is a significant contribution. I continue to hear from citizens that think we put too much money into the Ramsdale, and I'm a supporter. I try and address those concerns, but the concerns keep coming forward. So, you know, at some point in time, you know, when we're looking at achieving a goal, hopefully a date out there would help. You know, it's kind of like people wanting their streets fixed. It's okay, you're gonna fix my streets, but when am I gonna be on the schedule for getting fixed? It's a good group of people that operate and volunteer and bring all this culture to the community. It's just a shame that, you know, we don't have more resources, and they're competing resources. We made some painful cuts in the budget this year, and I suspect we'll have to make some next year in light of little growth in revenue. So keep up the good work, and if you can come up with a target date or you know, a schedule, I think that would be helpful when it comes to addressing people's concerns.
Understood, thanks.
Did I hear you say you'd at least break even this year?
With your support, that'll definitely help us do that, if not make a little bit of revenue at the end of the fiscal year. Thank you.
Questions? Discussion on deputy finance, deputy treasurer position. This item was tabled in the October 10, 2017 council work session. Comments? I think there was some concern expressed in October. Heather Peffley's position that she currently occupies, what grade level is that?
That currently is a grade level 2. Grade level 2.
And we're replacing it with a grade level 6 position?
Correct. We're just retitling positions. We still have the same head count, and they're gonna have different responsibilities. In this new position that we're pursuing is going to be a deputy treasurer, deputy finance director, or CFO position with a different skill set required. So we're just repositioning and reclassifying and coming up with different titles to get a higher level of work performed in the office.
There were 2 positions in the budget that we approved for this year that were reclassified during the budgeting process. Mr. Bradford's CFO position was regraded, and Ms. Blakesley in planning was. There was nothing to reclassify this position, and the salary is significantly different than a grade 2.
Well, number one, it wasn't reclassified because the position didn't exist previously. We went through the same metrics that we use in establishing where positions fall in our wage and classification study. And I believe I provided that information to council on how we arrived at that position's pay grade. Because we went through the same process that I went through with Ed and Denise last year, where we went through the matrix that was spelled out in our wage and classification study. We rated it, you come up with a raw number, and then that equates to a pay grade. So based on the job description and what we expect out of that position, that's where it fell in our wage and classification study. So it wasn't an arbitrary slotting. We went through it just like we would any other position outside of our union positions. So there's a format that we follow, and we've been consistent with that.
I was of the impression when we made the appointment for Heather that her position would be backfilled. And along with that assumption at the same grade level. And I'm guessing that other council members had the same feeling at the time that was done.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yes.
I don't see why the pay grade would be so different than,
Well, it's consistent with the white paper that was accepted by the council, I think it was 2014, and consistent with the reorganization, where it called for, when the current city clerk retired, then that position would be the position of clerk, that those duties would be given to the deputy clerk, and then we would then, in turn, have a new job description written and a new position created consistent with that white paper. And that's what we did. And I thought we communicated it better than apparently it was understood. We thought we communicated it quite clearly that we weren't going to increase the head count in that office. We were going to be creating new responsibilities and a new title in that position, or in that office.
I was of a totally different opinion. I'm gonna go back to the white paper. The last thing I see in minutes on that white paper being presented was that some research was going to be done and it was going to be represented to council. I've found nothing in minutes anywhere that accepts the council adopted or accepted there was no resolution or vote. And I go back to other white papers which I have reviewed on several occasions for different reasons in the past, and a lot of things are in white papers that have never been adopted. A deputy public works director position, for example. When we went to a public safety director position, and captains in the fire department were going to, on a rotating basis, assume the administrative role. And then the next year, we created a deputy chief position and backfilled the captain position and the firefighter position and such. So I'm a little concerned about white papers and what authority they carry in the planning and operating process. We seem to pick and choose, is what I'm saying.
Well, I can't speak to those and why those situations occurred, and I'm looking through the information I had, but we have the minutes from 2013 or 2014 where it indicated at the work session that the council's concurrence was to move forward with the conditions as established in that white paper, and to the staff's knowledge, we have not heard anything that changed that direction. And so we're moving forward. What happened with the other ones, I don't know.
my concern, I'm sorry, is when we did the budget, we didn't have the difference in wages, and I don't understand why the job duties would be so different now if we have the same amount of head count, and then why is there more work, and so now we need more wage. I just don't get that part.
First of all, it wasn't included in the budget because we weren't aware that Michelle was gonna retire. She had not given us notice of her retirement, so we couldn't, there were
We can always
indications that
do
she
an
was going
amendment.
to retire, but there was no absolute assurances, and so we didn't have that in there. In terms of, again, we're not increasing the number of employees in that department. We're tasking a different titled position with additional responsibilities.
Where did these additional responsibilities come from? Like, there's more expense to that department, and why would there be more for that department? I understand there's no more, we're not adding any more people.
Right.
But we're adding more wage to, why are we adding so much more?
Because of the skill set that we're looking to attract in an employee, it's gonna cost us more to get that employee with that skill set.
If I can just elaborate on that a little bit, there's a number of items that need to happen in a finance office that we're not able to give appropriate attention to right now, given the staff and limitations on the workload. And so part of the effort behind this restructuring is to be able to maybe develop some more resources to address those issues that aren't being handled right now. And it's nothing that is causing us to have compliance issues or anything like that, but it's more getting the office towards some better practices and best practices. So it'd be things like doing internal audits. It would be things like working towards more frequent reviews of particular transactions throughout the course of the year, updating policies and procedures, having somebody who can maybe do a little more work and helping me prepare for the audit. So there's a number of items in addition to that too, but that we're not getting to. And so the skill set and the educational requirements and the experience requirements for this restructured position are different than what's in the office now. To address the wage issue, the increase in Heather's wage from where she is now and the decrease or the lower starting wage that we're anticipating for the deputy treasurer, deputy finance position actually saves the city some money in the first few years. When you get out in years 7, 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, 9, as they start to move up that step scale, if that stays in place, then yes, ultimately that position will cost more than what it does today. But in the early years, you actually can save a few $1,000s probably. So probably for a couple of years, those salaries would about until they equalize. And then you moving forward, yes, you would have incremental costs that would be higher.
I would offer that if the position, if the change in grade of the position wasn't known when we did the budget, and it wasn't, I would speculate we could have just as easily done a budget amendment to correct that. And I would also go back to work sessions. In work sessions, we often will come to a consensus to put something on an agenda or to move forward on an ordinance or to move towards a different action, such as we did in the previous work session. We want to do an ordinance, we want to look at zoning, and those go through a step-by-step process. But no action is taken by council without vote or resolution or formal means in a regular council session. We don't vote and adopt things in work sessions. That's been my understanding.
Well, I fully agree, but the staff at that time the concurrence of council was to move forward with the white paper and adopt those over time. And from my conversations with staff that have been here since that directive was given by council, there's been nothing to countermand that. And so we've been moving forward like that, and no one said not to. And, when Michelle notified us that she was going to retire, that's when the wheels started turning. We offered the staff's recommendation for Michelle's replacement, and it was consistent with what was outlined in the white paper. And then we're moving on to the next step, which is identifying the new title and working to fill those job responsibilities under that title with a new employee. So we're following the direction we were given. It's incremental. So we feel very comfortable that we're doing what the council directed us to do.
I think we've got a lot of good staff, and we'll have more good staff come on board. And I certainly want to make sure that they're properly graded and compensated. I just felt a bit blindsided by this one and the change. Perhaps just a miscommunication on my part. But
It certainly was not intended to blindside anyone. Ed and I talked about that, and Ed actually reviewed the tape, and we felt that it was fully explained. And if it wasn't, I apologize for that. We thought it was fully explained.
I'm not going to take it any further. I congratulate Heather again on her appointment and salary, and look forward to better services from the finance department in the future. With that, we've got Presentation of quarterly strategic plan update. This item was tabled from the October 10, 2017 council work session. City Manager Ad Taylor will present the quarterly strategic plan update.
As council is aware, we set our strategic goals earlier this year, and I promised that a couple of things to council. Number one, that we would make staff assignments for each of those items, and then furthermore, to report back on our progress on a quarterly basis. So, reporting back tonight, and the items that you see in red are something new since your last update. You can see a number of these things have been accomplished. A number of them are just things that we continually work towards on an ongoing basis. So you can see what the strategy is, the time frame for completion, and then who, and we call him the champion, who's responsible for it. You see on this first page, there's a number of them completed, a number of them ongoing. The same in the subsequent pages is that we're working towards completing them to the best of our ability, with the understanding that we know and realize that some of them are going to be ongoing and will not be completed in a year. As an example, we have one of the rail relocation. That's certainly not going to be done in a year or maybe 2 years, but we continually work to make progress on that. So council was presented with everything that we've done to date, with the items in red as being something new, and certainly would entertain any questions that council might have in terms of explanation or understanding. But, you know, I'm pleased with the results of staff. These are things that we are continually in our forefront and we're aware of and move forward on completion.
Are we going to have to break down, there's a number of items on here under champion, such as THAD, AES, and a few of them. Are we have to break down how much time AES is going to need to devote to whatever this is?
Yeah, and then that's going to be a totally different discussion. Number one, depending if council continues to fund AES moving forward, and more importantly, the manner in which AES is funded. So then we're going to have to, if council decides to continue funding AES and it's on a hourly rate fee for service, then we're going to have discussions with council as to, are these priorities that you want to invest AES dollars on? So that's going to be an entirely different discussion at the right time, and I envision that probably happening after the first of the year. Okay, absent any questions?
I would say, you know, one of the things on there, when you talk about the boat launch, marina, from our Harbor Commission meeting this morning, the fee, we certainly did better in revenue. Even though we may have had less boats, there were bigger boats and stayed for a longer period of time and had a better financial experience through the marina. And we picked up fees with the Arthur Street launch. So you start seeing some success there. That's commendable.
Yeah, that was good news out of the Harbor Commission today, and increased revenue even with fewer boats in. But I think a lot of that, again, you know, it's one of those things, as you put it down for a strategy, you focus your attention on your resources, and hopefully you're going to see some positive results.
I think you've got one category on here that talks about manufacturing, and I can't remember. I don't know which one of these points it's under. It's not on that page. You have one on here about manufacturing.
Manufacturing strategy 1.2.2.
Yeah. I've got that with Denise and AES.
Right.
Did that have anything to do with the $40,000 report that we got from AES on September 19th?
You mean the SET, the Stronger Economies Together?
Yeah, that's probably it.
That
The
would
one that
be-
was created actually by Fourth Economy.
That was a part of it, not
Okay.
everything though?
I'm just kind of brainstorming here a little bit. And I know we've talked about going for fee for service, but I'm wondering if any of these, where we've got AES down here, if we're going to think a little bit more out of the box and who can handle what, if any of these can be handled by the new structure that the chamber has proposed as far as economic development goes, especially in jobs. So I don't know if it's appropriate to suggest this at this point, but I think in some of these cases, if we look at where we have AES in here, look at other areas, we could assign that part of it to, say, the chamber, and save those dollars that we want to spend on AES for some of the really large projects that maybe we need some special help with. Again, I'm just brainstorming. I'm thinking of the sewers. I'm thinking of big-ticket items
Well,
that we might have.
at the appropriate time, I could talk with the chamber to see if that would be a possibility.
I think that's a good sort of a contingency to have.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Thank you. Concerns and comments, citizen comment. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Citizens in attendance shall be recognized by the mayor for comments limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Are there any citizens that wish to make comments?
Hello, good evening. My name's Luann Dyke. I'm new to the city. I live on 4th Street, a couple of blocks from Jefferson Elementary. I'm very concerned about the safety of our sidewalks. I can see throughout town what a huge task and expense this must be. Where are we at with assessment and repair, replace, or, I'm sorry, I don't know the history of all this, but at some point, someone's gonna fall, hit their head, and sue. And I just wonder where, if anything is happening. Thank you.
If I could answer.
You may? No?
Yeah, if you would like to come back on Tuesday, November 28th at our work session.
Is that the one where it said
It's gonna be talking about our sidewalk ordinance / program.
Yeah, okay. That will be, okay, I'll be there, I'll be
Yeah,
there.
that'd be a good work session to
Okay.
attend. I think it'd be informative.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other citizens that wish to comment? If not, we will move on to officials and staff. City manager.
Yes, a reminder to council, I've already informed you of this, but I'll be leaving town tomorrow afternoon and won't be back in town until the 29th of October. I'm gonna be in North Dakota on a trip and consider myself extremely fortunate because I'm gonna be accompanied by my son, and he's carved out 10 days in his life to spend with Dad, so I'm gonna enjoy myself.
Good for you.
Have a good trip.
Yep, I plan on it. I will be, it's hard to unplug, but, if you need to get a hold of me, I'm gonna be monitoring my emails, and I'll have the cell, and Ed will have additional methods to contact me.
Okay. City attorney.
Nothing, Honor, thank you.
City clerk.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Finance director, CFO. Public safety. Public works.
Good evening. I've got a few things for you. First of all, we discussed the recycling center a couple months ago. Talked about how we were going to change out one of our high definition cameras with the other. That proved to be successful. The mayor alerted us to materials that were placed outside of a dumpster that shouldn't have been last Thursday. Friday morning, we were able to review the videotapes and in very short order this time identify somebody that had placed those there, and we're able to get a license plate. So we've turned that over to the city police department, and they're investigating that right now. So that's already showing some signs of improvement for us. The second thing I wanted to mention is the street crack sealing that we just completed that on Friday. We completed about 10.5 miles of crack sealing throughout the city, and it took the public works staff about 8 days to complete that. The crack sealing that we did are on the Paisley rated streets that are 7s and 8s. So a brand new street is a 10. Immediately the following year it goes to a 9. As soon as there's more than one crack 40 feet apart, it goes to an 8, and then they continue to go downhill. So the 7s and 8s that we crack sealed, there were a lot of candidates, like I said, over 10 miles. As soon as we crack seal those and those get rated in the Paisley rating again, it adds remaining service lives to those roads, and they either maintain that 8 status or the 7s get upgraded to that 8 status. So that was a very good return on investment in the maintenance of the streets. I believe we'll have just under $10,000 invested in the rental of the equipment and the materials that we purchased this year, and believe that this will be very sustainable going forward and cost effective. Now, if you think about that, we did 10.5 miles of crack sealing, got those to an 8. We did 6 miles of the slurry seal this spring, and we brought those roads up to an 8. That's 16.5 miles of streets that we brought up to that 8 level. That's 1/3 of our street network. So that's a pretty significant impact on the streets this year. In the current budget, we still have the mill and fill on the local streets that we need to do. But I wanted to kind of drive home this point again. The block of 12th Street that we reconstructed this summer cost about $145,000, $150,000 for that one block of reconstruction. For the 16.5 miles of maintenance that we did, we could expend the same amount of funds and rebuild three blocks of city streets. So about $350,000 plus or minus. So that's why it's so important for us to invest in the front end on these low-cost maintenance items and stay with them and not let the streets get to that point where reconstruction is necessary. So we're gaining ground, but I just kind of wanted to drive home that point again. The third item is we completed a round of smoke testing throughout the sewers in Manistee. That was part of the wet weather corrective action program that we've been talking about. There were well over 100 sources. I think you got the information through Thad's email of how many locations that we found. Some are quite significant, most of them are quite small. But the engineers have equated how much water is likely attributed to those under our design storm. So that week and a half of work that we did with very low investment, honestly, has a potential of saving over $2 million of construction dollars on that future bond sale. So I just wanted to demonstrate that through the corrective action program, we're looking for every way that we can bring that final construction dollar down. And the efforts that the Spicer Group did along with Michigan Rural Water and some of our staff, I think, was very beneficial to the community.
So I have a couple of questions on the smoke testing.
Sure.
So if a resident had smoke in their homes or around their property, what did that mean?
Well, that's two separate questions. So if smoke entered your home, that means that you have a pipe within your house. Normally, if you go underneath your kitchen sink, it's got that little S that's called a trap. Well, there's water that sits in the bottom of that pipe. So sewer gases can't get up through there and get up into your sink and make your house stink. Sometimes in for instance, down in your basement, there's traps in the floor drains that are down there. If you're not running water into those, they can dry out. And so if you had smoke coming out of a specific place, a floor drain, for instance, if you poured a half gallon of water down there and did that periodically, you would not have those issues. If it's coming outside of the house, and the guys that were walking the streets and identifying those, we took pictures of them, we identified what we believe the source is, and then Spicer's compiling a list, and we'll send out letters to each of those locations and identify what we saw and what would need to be done to correct the issue. So some of them may be a roof drain, gutters that were smoking. Well, that means that the water that runs off their roof goes into the roof gutters, ends up into the sanitary sewer system. And that's not allowed by our ordinance or by the state law. So those will have to be disconnected and routed away and then capped. Several instances, people have cleanouts in their sewer that are sometimes in their yard or in their driveway. If the caps get knocked off of those, smoke will leave. Those might not contribute a lot of water, but some places they can. So simply putting a cap in there, going to the hardware store and affixing a cap back in there would solve that issue. So most of these will be really easy to fix. As soon as we get the list from Spicer, there's a few places where the Public Works installed bulkheads or catch basins and installed concrete bulkheads, and one of them, it's gone. Don't know who took it out, don't know how they did it, but it's gone. So we'll be doing some more permanent measures to make sure that can't happen again. We found some that were cracked, so we'll be able to repair those pretty easily, and those will have significant impacts on the system.
So it was a good thing for the residents and the city to find this stuff out, right?
It's a great thing for the ratepayers, yes. Now, an interesting thing, last weekend we had a lot of rain. At the treatment plant, we recorded 2 inches of rain over the weekend. 1.5 inches fell in just about one event. 1.5 inches of rain, that's a lot of water. And we still did not have a CSO this weekend, even with all that water. So I think we're making some progress. The flip side of that is we had 3/4 inch of rain this summer on a couple occasions, and we did have a CSO. So a lot of it's based on where in the city it's falling, where those illicit connections are, the intensity of the water, a lot of different factors, but we're making progress.
Hey, Jeff, on the crack ceiling, that's something that's done every year, correct?
Something that we intend to do every year.
Okay.
Yes. And we'll be doing them on the 7s and 8s again. So sometimes that list will be quite large, sometimes it'll be fairly small. But we've trained our guys in-house now, so we intend to do that on an annual basis.
If I can give you one area that, at least my concern, is on 10th and Cypress, right in front of Salt City Car Wash on the west side. There's a lot of cracks around the sewer grate. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jeff, could you quickly talk about the paving of the cuts in the roadway?
Sure. Each year, we break the road open to repair sewers, to repair water services and so forth. And then I believe you're aware of that Lighthouse Landings, there was a underground utility issue between Consumers and Charter Cable where they cut the road to do the repair. Nobody paved it. Each year, we normally have a pretty sizable list. We bid that out to the 3 local paving companies. We select the low bidder and we move forward with getting those patched. This fall, we bid that out in the traditional form that we always do. We got 2 prices. They were astronomically high, and the pavers just said, we've got more work than what we can do and just really don't have the time for it. So because the cost was so high, we've elected to, yesterday and today, dug those out. We're putting in our cold patch in it so that it holds up over the summer or the winter time and doesn't disrupt our plows and that sort of thing. And then we'll just add those to next year's patches and try to get that paving done a little bit earlier. We try to time it so that we capture all that we can and don't leave anything before fall. But honestly, I think that the increase in the gas tax money that's going into all the municipalities for paving, there's just a lot more construction going on, a lot more demand on the paving. and the contractors haven't increased their capacities to match that yet, so.
House Landing, the holes filled?
I believe it was done today. I'd have to double check to put my word on that, but I know it was being prepped.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Planning and zoning. Councilmember Krueger?
I continue to go back and forth in my mind, different things that we can do to support charitable organizations within our city or infrastructure. Some of you know that I have very old parents, and they are in Tucson, Arizona. Tucson, Arizona is a place that I've become very familiar with, of course, over the last, almost 20 years. My parents actually lived north of Tucson in Oro Valley, and it was literally carved out of the desert. I mean, it was a great thing to do because you could do all the planning for it at once. And one of the restrictions that they have on new development is an ordinance that requires that at any new development that goes in, they have to actually, in commercial buildings, buy local artwork. And they have to, in a percentage of that new building cost, say it's 0.5% or whatever. So they have to, if it's a big project, maybe $100,000 worth of artwork is hanging on the walls in those buildings. Now, it has occurred to me that they probably also get, perhaps, and I need somebody that's more in tune to this than I am to investigate whether they get a tax write-off for that, which would probably be a win-win for the developers. If that's true, and if we could apply it toward new development coming in, we could perhaps set up an ordinance that says, say, 1%, pick a percentage of the building cost would go toward supporting the arts or supporting, say, just adopt a street. Again, I'm thinking out of the box, but some sort of improvement for the city. And I don't know if that's something that could be a tax write-off win for the developer or not, but it's something that's being done in other areas. Might be a good idea to look at it sometime. I know everybody's busy, but I would like to see a way to support projects that need to be done around the city on a gentler way, rather than painfully out of the budget. That's about it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, one thing for staff. I had a question asked me about the catamaran race. Little background about that. Did we collect any money, and where'd the money go? And
We did get the check, didn't we, Michelle?
We did.
We did, they paid as promised. We got good feedback from the group. I anticipate they'll be coming back next year. Didn't create any problems for us, so overall it went well.
where does that money go? Does it go to the general fund? Does it?
General fund.
Okay. Just couldn't answer the question.
I have nothing.
Councilmember Warlick?
Just a comment on the only contested city council race so far. I'm going to throw my support out for Linda Beaton. Linda, over the past 2 years, has always come prepared for the meetings, brought information to the meetings. Her agenda has always been Manistee first and never just the street. So I would ask that that everybody vote for Linda come the election time.
I just have one thing. I had someone recently asked about why doesn't MCC have a crosswalk where all the other schools are? And I think we had gone over this, but I don't remember. Was that something that we had to do with MDOT?
I don't know,
it's a
Jeff,
highway?
do you have any information on that?
Before I worked for the city of Manistee, I was part of Safe Routes to School initiative. We received a grant to proceed with that program, and we included both Manistee High School, Jefferson School, the middle school at the time, and MCC, and inquired directly about that. And the concern that MDOT had with placing a crosswalk across 31, is that what you're talking about? Is that there was no sidewalk on the east side or on the west side at the time. There's sidewalk now that I believe that was extended, I can't picture it. It was extended when Family Fair was built,
Yeah.
but there's no receiving point on the west side of the road. And so they were concerned about that. And MDOT's got jurisdiction over it.
Okay.
Now, that will change in the next couple years when we rebuild 12th Street.
So you'll go all the way up to 31.
Because the next segment of 12th Street through our small urban funding will begin at US 31 and go to Maple Street. And the intention is to add sidewalks along that and really to build it to the major street standards, just like the section on 12th Street we just did. So that may change it, and it could be incorporated in the project at that time.
And that's it.
Yeah. Mr. McCullough, the lift that's down in front of the Ramsdale, is that the one that we purchased?
I didn't hear the question.
There's a lift down in front of the Ramsdale?
Yes, that's part of our motor pool.
That is the item that we purchased?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yep, it's been used
I
almost
just-
nonstop since we purchased it.
Thank you. And Mr. Blakely, Peninsula zoning. Are vehicle sales allowed down there?
Vehicle sales?
Yeah,
I
just a question.
don't think it is.
Looks like some vehicles are parked and for sale down there, so,
Privately
Who's
owned
that?
vehicles?
not my own vehicle, but trucks.
Where?
Where specifically?
Down on the peninsula.
Yeah,
Well, do you have a better location?
I'll take a picture and send it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Where are you talking about?
Take a
Like
picture
the old
and send it.
scene? Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Send me a picture and
Sure,
we'll
I will.
follow up.
Other than that, thanks for everybody being here. See you
Thanks,
later.
Mark.
Adjourn.
Nice. What?
Nice.